Oh, my God.
Not bad for a pillow.
Oh. My problem is I've got one mobile and 2 children.
I'm sure your husband, who was watching off camera, will be equally happy with the good news.
Oh, I think so.
That's great.
Imagine sitting on an old chair for years, only to discover that its unusual joints, original finish, or hidden maker could make it a coveted design treasure. On Antiques Roadshow, furniture once overlooked in attics, thrift stores, and family homes has revealed rare craftsmanship, celebrated designers, and surprising histories. Today, we're uncovering the most remarkable furniture ever appraised, from handmade antiques to groundbreaking modern designs. What separates an ordinary household piece from a collector's masterpiece? Let's examine the details and find out. What makes these two miniature pieces of furniture special is not simply their age or craftsmanship. Their true significance comes from the way they once carried the image of a familiar room to a child living far from home. Sometimes, the smallest objects can preserve the greatest sense of comfort.
They belong to my mother. I believe that they belong to my grandmother, and then she gave them to my mother when she was a small child. She had polio when she was 9, which was in 1939.
Okay.
The hospital she went to, they allowed her to have these.
Inside an unfamiliar hospital room, objects recalling home could carry meaning far beyond their original function. The owner remembers that the family once possessed a full-size bed and dresser of similar appearance, later given to other relatives during the 1950s. That connection makes these pieces seem more like miniature versions of a real bedroom than ordinary doll furniture. However, no label, maker's mark, or documentation proves that they were created alongside the full-size set. The appraiser recognizes Victorian styling and dates both objects to the 1860s or 1870s. The bed combines walnut with chestnut, maintains proportions close to full-size furniture, and features carefully executed carving. Its miniature mattress also survives, making the piece resemble a real bed reduced in scale rather than a toy reproducing only the exterior shape. Natural patina reinforces its age and indicates that the surface has not undergone excessive restoration. The dresser is equally refined, with a mirror, drawers, and clearly defined miniature pulls. Those details lead the appraiser to consider that it may have been a salesman's sample. Such models allowed sellers to demonstrate style, proportions, and construction without transporting bulky, full-size furniture. The bed, however, carries a more personal character because it resembles furniture once used by the family and retains its mattress. Two possibilities can therefore coexist. The dresser may have been a commercial sample, while the bed may have been made to correspond with bedroom furniture in the home. The objects need not have come from the same maker, despite sharing a general style and period. On the collector market, the family story makes them memorable but does not determine monetary value by itself. The appraiser must still consider the wood, accuracy of scale, carving, completeness, patina, and condition. Because the dresser contains more complex details, it generally attracts stronger interest among collectors of miniature furniture.
Any idea what you think they're worth?
No, no.
The bed is probably worth between $200 and $350, and the dresser is probably worth between $450 and $650.
Oh, wow.
The dresser received the higher valuation, but the bed remains most closely connected to the memory that makes the set irreplaceable. An appraisal can establish market value, but it cannot fully measure the worth of objects that once brought the comfort of home into a hospital room. What makes this chair memorable is not simply its elaborate carving or pink upholstery. Its story began with a completely instinctive choice, made before the owner knew when the chair was created or who might have made it. Sometimes, an impulsive auction purchase opens a door into an entire era of design.
Discriminating collector, aren't
Exactly.
you? How much did you pay for it?
Around $100.
Okay.
After bringing the chair home, the owner still did not know whether it was a genuine antique or a later reproduction of Victorian furniture. The clues are found in its walnut frame, where the form and ornament are associated with John JELLIF, a cabinet maker who worked in Newark, New Jersey. During the second half of the 19th century, JELLIF became known for coordinated parlor suites containing sofas, armchairs, and side chairs intended for formal interiors. Such furniture served practical needs while also expressing a household's taste and social position. This side chair dates to around 1870, when Renaissance revival strongly influenced American interior design. Without a clear maker's mark, the appraiser must rely on a combination of stylistic characteristics. The flat crest rail, central medallion, and circular rosettes all correspond with the visual language commonly found in JELLIF designs. The most convincing evidence appears in the legs, which feature incised decoration, tapering shafts, and expanded ball feet. Together, these details support the attribution but cannot provide absolute confirmation because many products from the workshop were never marked. The most accurate description is therefore attributed to John JELLIF, meaning the chair matches the maker's style but lacks direct documentation. Age and an important name do not always guarantee a high price. An individual side chair is usually less desirable than a complete parlor suite, while heavily decorated Victorian furniture does not suit every modern interior. Walnut is a quality material, but collectors often prefer rosewood examples, more elaborately carved designs, or complete furniture sets. The pink upholstery creates visual appeal, but if replaced, it contributes little to the historical value of the original frame. The final appraisal must therefore balance craftsmanship, attribution, condition, and current market demand.
Sometimes the price can still be underwhelming to a degree. And in this case, we're probably talking about $300 to $500. So it's not
Really?
an amazing amount of money.
Okay.
But, but I think from my perspective, and hopefully from your perspective, is this captures an era.
The owner did not discover a fortune, but confirmed that an emotional choice had led to an antique with genuine character. Pink brought the chair home, but the history within its walnut frame is what may preserve it for years to come. What makes this rocking chair special is not simply its rustic surface or the age the family once imagined. Its true significance comes from the memories shared by generations who were rocked in it. Sometimes, a family legend can be historically inaccurate while remaining completely truthful in emotion.
Well, the story goes, it was made by an Indian chieftain, and it was given to our family who came over from Scotland, and I guess the chair goes back pretty far. It's been passed down through the family, and they lived in the colonies.
Alongside the photographs, the owner preserves a letter written by the grandfather before his death, recalling childhood with the grandmother in the farmhouse parlor. She once promised to keep rocking until the child's feet touched the floor, while the child secretly hoped never to grow that tall. The letter makes the family provenance emotionally vivid, but oral history alone cannot identify a maker or establish a date. If each generation had children roughly 20 years apart, 5 generations may reach only to the late 19th century. More reliable evidence appears where the front leg meets the rocker, joined by a standardized bolt and nut. This hardware suits factory-assembled furniture sold through catalogs rather than a centuries-old handmade object. The frame uses slender hickory saplings, a material valued for flexibility, strength, and durability. Those clues point toward the Old Hickory Chair Company of Martinsville, Indiana. The company began producing furniture from hickory saplings during the 1890s and was incorporated in 1899. Its chairs, rockers, and tables were shipped to homes, resorts, and lodges across the United States. Old hickory left the wood's natural curves and knots visible, turning them into design features that made each piece appear freshly brought from the forest. That rustic appearance helps explain why the family legend sounded convincing, even though the chair was a commercial product. With no maker's mark, the attribution depends on its materials, construction, and resemblance to documented catalog examples. A date around 1910 also fits the family chronology, since the grandfather was born in 1909. Although the company produced many similar rockers, aged patina, bold form, and renewed interest in rustic interiors continued to support collector demand.
Do you have any idea what it's worth?
No idea, no clue.
Well, they made a lot of these, but they have come back into vogue. It's probably at auction, I would estimate it at $1,000 to $2,000.
Wow. I'm really surprised, actually, that it's not older.
The appraisal changed the story of who made the chair, but it erased none of the memories preserved within it. Its deepest value lies not in how many centuries it has survived, but in how many children were rocked there before their feet finally touched the floor. These two chairs came remarkably close to being left behind, simply because they would not fit inside a small car. At the time, the owner had no reason to suspect that they belonged to the earliest chapter of an influential modern design. Sometimes an object survives not because its importance is already understood, but because someone makes the effort to bring it home.
My grandma gave them to me when she was getting older and moving into an assisted living home. They wouldn't fit in my car. It's a small coupe, and I was trying to throw them away. And my fiance luckily said, I'll take them apart and put them in my car. And so I brought them home, and they just kind of been sitting in my studio. My grandma paid $5 for them.
Grandmother acquired the pair when the Knights of Columbus sold its furniture, probably during the 1960s, so the owner assumed they had been made around that time. The appraiser instead identified them as designs by Charles and Ray Eames, dating to around 1949, almost the first generation of what became a mid-century modern icon. After the Second World War, America needed well-designed, affordable furniture suited to a rapidly changing lifestyle. Charles and Ray Eames answered that demand with a continuous molded shell shaped to support the body without the traditional combination of frame and upholstery. The breakthrough material was fiberglass reinforced plastic, transformed from an industrial product into furniture that was lightweight, durable, and suitable for mass production. A label underneath records the early partnership between Herman Miller and Zenith Plastics, helping establish the manufacturing period. Shock mounts allowed the legs to be removed and the same shell paired with different bases, making the design adaptable to many interiors. This version is known as the Dax chair and retains a rope edge within the fiberglass rim, a feature associated with early examples. Its parchment color is equally revealing because the shell remains slightly translucent, allowing light to expose the fiberglass strands inside. That effect diminished when production shifted toward darker, more opaque colors. Collectors, therefore, examine the originality of the label, base, shock mounts, rope edge, and fiberglass surface. Vintage shells often develop staining when resin reacts around the shock mounts, but this pair has avoided most of that problem. Unfortunately, one chair has a crack, preventing the pair from reaching the highest valuation.
Even though there's a crack there, had they been in perfect shape, the auction value would have been about $2,000. Now, due to the crack here, we're closer to about $1,500 for the pair.
Wow. Cool. Not bad for $5.
The crack reduced the valuation, but that damage is minor compared with what almost happened when the chairs were nearly left behind. Two pieces of furniture, once considered too bulky for the car, turned out to preserve an early chapter of a design that changed how industrial materials entered the modern home. And the person who saved them was not a collector or specialist, but simply someone patient enough to take the chairs apart and find room for them in the car. These two white lamps had no striking colors, elaborate decoration, or surviving labels to reveal their origin. They possessed only a silhouette that felt both familiar and unusual, distinctive enough to make the owner pause among countless secondhand objects. More than a decade passed before that instinctive purchase revealed its true significance.
These white lamps I saw at a thrift store over 15 years ago. I wasn't really looking for lamps. I thought they were cool and they're glass. It wasn't until I moved into my recent place where somebody pointed out that, hey, they actually may be legitimately old and worth something, and it made me curious ever since.
So what did you pay for them?
Probably no more than $9 each.
The owner regularly searched thrift stores around Atlanta without collecting any particular category. The lamps came home because of their unusual shape and remained in use without anyone knowing their maker or age. After the owner moved, a friend suggested that they might be noteworthy vintage designs, inspiring further investigation. Identification was difficult because the paper labels, inscriptions, and other searchable marks had disappeared. The appraiser instead relied on the silhouette and treatment of the glass to connect them with ELIZA JOHANSSON-PAPE, an important Finnish lighting designer. Trained in furniture design in Helsinki, JOHANSSON-PAPE moved into lighting during the Second World War. The designer's work reflects Scandinavian modernism, in which function, proportion, and material create beauty without unnecessary ornament. This model was designed around 1954 and remained in production until the late 1960s. They are associated with ILLUMINATED, the Finnish glassmaker known for bringing modern design into everyday life. Opaque glass conceals the bulb and diffuses a soft light, transforming each lamp into a single, evenly illuminated form. The silhouette is often described as mushroom-shaped, but it also demonstrates how JOHANSSON-PAPE reduced natural forms into curves suited to modern interiors. That apparent simplicity required precise proportions so the slender stem could balance the broad glass dome. Collector value is further strengthened by the large size, excellent condition, and survival of both lamps as a matching pair. In vintage lighting, pairs are often more desirable than individual examples, while intact glass is essential because cracks and chips are extremely difficult to restore successfully.
In a retail venue, these would sell for between anywhere from $2,000 to $3,000.
Wow. For the pair or each?
For the pair.
Wow. Wow. That's a great $20 investment.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Great eye from a very good friend.
Their value comes not from a glamorous label, but from a design distinctive enough to be recognized after its original identification disappeared. The lamps demonstrate that Scandinavian design does not need extravagance to endure, because form, material, and light already provide a clear identity. A chance thrift store purchase ultimately proved that the eye can recognize something exceptional long before the buyer understands exactly what has been found. This mirror does not possess the understated beauty normally associated with a household object. Its heavy frame, sparkling surface, and aging electrical system make it resemble a piece of decor from another era. That appearance, unlike anything surrounding it, made the owner stop in the middle of a thrift store.
I brought a mirror that lights up, and it's got some kind of crystals on the outside. I found it at a thrift store, and it was $7.99.
You're kidding.
No.
The words "made in West Germany" showed that the mirror was not new, but they could not identify its maker or date. After bringing it home, the owner plugged it in and discovered that the lighting still worked, although the old wiring requires inspection before regular use. The appraiser identified it as an illuminated mirror produced by PALWA around 1970. The West German company became known for lighting and decorative objects, combining illumination, gilded metal, and crystal. Here, the light source is concealed within channels around the frame, instead of leaving the bulbs exposed. Light passes through the faceted surfaces, reflects from the gold-plated brass, and returns toward the mirror as a soft halo. The effect clarifies the reflection while illuminating the face more evenly and warmly than direct overhead lighting. PALWA commonly used high-quality crystal, probably Swarovski, to intensify refraction. The pieces are arranged at different depths and in several sizes rather than across one flat plane. This layered construction redirects light as the viewer moves, making the mirror behave like an illuminated sculpture. Its design reflects interiors of the late 1960s and early 1970s, when modern forms were combined with gold-toned metal, reflective surfaces, and theatrical glamour. PALWA produced lamps and mirrors in many forms, but backlit crystal examples now attract a dedicated collector market. Because numerous imitations exist, attribution depends on construction, materials, optical effect, and West German origin rather than appearance alone. Condition is equally important, since missing crystals, damaged plating, deteriorated mirror glass, or replaced wiring can reduce desirability. This example remains operational and largely complete, making it more appealing than pieces missing essential components.
This at auction is worth more than $7.99.
I hope so.
Well, it's worth $2,000 to $3,000 at auction, conservatively.
Wow. Oh, that's amazing. That is amazing.
Do you go thrifting a lot?
Every day.
The valuation is impressive, but the owner knew nothing about PALWA and could not verify the crystals while standing in the thrift store. There was only a feeling that the design differed from everything surrounding it. Sometimes, a remarkable discovery begins with curiosity and the decision to bring home what everyone else overlooked. At first glance, this tiny chair seems to belong in a child's room or a carefully furnished dollhouse. Yet its proportions, upholstery, and moving mechanism reproduce a full-sized lounge chair with remarkable precision. It is not merely miniature furniture, but a surviving trace of how major stores once decided what the public might buy.
My great-grandfather worked for Gimbel's and was a buyer, and he would travel overseas and bring back items like this to see if they would want to sell it in their catalog. And this is an item that he brought back in, I believe it was 1936 or 37. And apparently they didn't want to sell it because it was too expensive for a child's toy. And so he brought it home for my grandmother.
Calling it a toy concealed its original purpose, because it was actually a salesman sample representing a full-size piece of furniture. During the catalog era, miniature models allowed buyers to examine form, proportion, upholstery, and construction without transporting an entire chair over long distances. A high-quality sample had to reproduce not only the appearance of the finished product, but also the way it operated. Its functioning movement therefore separates it from doll furniture, decorative miniatures, and simple display models. The design captures the machine-age spirit of the mid-1930s, when American furniture began adopting forms inspired by automobiles, trains, and industrial engineering. Its low silhouette, continuous curves, and smooth surfaces suggest movement even while the chair remains still. Instead of the heavy frames, carving, and ornament of earlier furniture, its appeal comes from proportion, line, and the way every component forms a unified shape. This was also the language of streamlined moderne, which connected beauty with speed, machinery, and confidence in a more efficient modern life. Machine-age furniture flourished only briefly before the Second World War, transformed materials, manufacturing, and consumer taste. After the war, American modernism turned toward plywood, plastic, fiberglass, and new methods of mass production, leaving earlier designs as an easily overlooked transitional chapter. That short history makes surviving examples more desirable, especially when their original upholstery, proportions, and mechanisms remain intact. The chair appeals to collectors of salesman samples, machine-age design, and furniture history. Its connection to a Gimbel's buyer also provides convincing provenance, explaining how an unusual commercial model entered one family and remained there. This overlap between several collecting markets gives it greater value than an anonymous miniature admired only for its size.
Do you have any idea what it might be worth?
No, like I know, $60 back then, I believe, is what they're going to sell it for.
At auction today, you're probably looking at, for this chair, in the $2,000, $2,500 range, somewhere around there.
What makes the chair memorable is not simply its valuation, but the survival of a design once rejected for the catalog. It still preserves the proportions, mechanism, and machine-age character of a style that has nearly disappeared. Sometimes, never reaching mass production is precisely what allows an object to become an exceptional survivor. This chair appears to be drawn from one continuous line, with its back, arms, and legs flowing through the same movement. Its light silhouette makes the design look simple, although every curve presented a difficult manufacturing problem. Its story also reveals that the famous name attached to a piece of furniture does not always belong to the person who created it.
I brought two chairs that were designed by my father, John Pyle, when he worked for George Nelson in the 1950s in the design studios in New York City. He designed these chairs. He designed also the steel frame furniture line and other types of furniture for George Nelson.
A lot of people don't know that George Nelson was an architect and that he had people working for him like your dad.
Yes.
The owner grew up with the chair, so its attribution to John Pyle is supported by direct family provenance rather than style alone. Today, the design is commonly called the pretzel chair because its looping crest rail and curved legs resemble a twisted pretzel. In 1952, however, it was simply called the laminated chair, emphasizing the technique behind its construction. Thin layers of birchwood were joined, pressed, and bent in molds to create continuous curves difficult to achieve with solid wood. The process made furniture appear lighter in both weight and form, but it was extremely difficult to control. Every layer had to remain aligned, hold the correct curve, and avoid cracking or warping after leaving the mold. John Pyle's challenge was turning an elegant idea into furniture that could be mass-produced affordably. Although designed in 1952, the chair did not enter production until around 1957 and remained available only briefly. Its proposed price of approximately $100 was too expensive for many households during the late 1950s. Complex construction also prevented the manufacturer from reducing costs enough to achieve commercial scale. According to the appraisal, only about 100 chairs from the original production were completed. That limited output transformed a commercial disappointment into a rare design collectible. The chair also represents the studio system of American design, where teams developed products marketed under the name of a creative director or company. Its family provenance, therefore, helps restore John Pyle's role behind the George Nelson label. Collector value depends heavily on structural integrity, original finish, and authenticity, because improper restoration can distort the curves or weaken the laminated wood.
The pretzel chair, the laminated chair, using period terminology, would be worth about $2,000 to $3,000 at auction, and it might bring $4,000 because they never come up. This chair, the prototype, could bring $10,000 to $15,000 at auction for the side chair.
What makes the pretzel chair important is not simply its rarity or valuation. It preserves a design that exceeded the affordable manufacturing capabilities of its own era, and the legacy of a designer rarely credited on the finished product. Sometimes, design history is rewritten through furniture that has quietly survived within one family for decades. Not every decorative object was created to make a room feel gentle or elegant. With its fierce expression and downward stare, this creature became an especially unforgettable sight for a child. Over time, however, the object that once inspired fear became one of the family's strangest stories.
My parents always had it hanging in the corner in the living room, and as a kid I used to think it was really frightening, and I used to decorate it with balloons and things. The family history is that it came from my great uncle in Pennsylvania.
With no documentary provenance or clear maker's mark, the appraiser relied on the clay, modeling, glaze, and application of color. Those features point toward Italy, where numerous pottery manufacturers operated during the 19th century, although many marks remain poorly documented. The letter N within the mark could indicate Naples, but it cannot establish a firm attribution. More convincing evidence appears in the freely modeled clay, multicolored glaze, and gilding that emphasizes the creature's expression. Its bold colors, glossy surface, and energetic form are consistent with Italian decorative pottery intended to command attention within an interior. The appraiser places it within the Renaissance Revival, a movement that reused forms from Renaissance art and architecture during the second half of the 19th century. Rather than copying historical objects exactly, artists applied masks, grotesques, and imaginary creatures to furniture, ceramics, and architectural decoration. Although commonly described as a gargoyle, this figure is technically a grotesque because a true architectural gargoyle functions as a waterspout. It is also not an independent sculpture, but a wall bracket with a flat upper surface intended to support a small decorative object. Mounted above eye level, the creature appears to lean downward and watch anyone entering the room. Its eyes, open mouth, and lower facial features were therefore modeled to create maximum impact when viewed from below. The bracket may originally have belonged to a symmetrical pair, although no evidence of a companion survives. Accumulated dust has darkened the glaze, but cleaning should proceed carefully with cotton swabs and minimal water to protect both the gilding and surface. Condition is especially important because the ears, teeth, and projecting details are vulnerable to damage, while finding a comparable replacement would be nearly impossible.
But it is really a terrific piece. It's hard to put a price on it because I've never seen one, never seen anything like it. But my guess is a retail price would probably be at least $2,000 or $3,000.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
What makes the bracket memorable is not simply its valuation, but its unusual form and unmistakable visual power. The creature once decorated with balloons to make it less frightening is now treasured precisely because of its strange appearance. Sometimes, the quality that once made an object difficult to love becomes the very reason it can never be replaced. Some objects are discovered in attics, with almost no trace of the journey that brought them there. Its dark wooden surface and solemn face give this object an ancient presence, although its purpose cannot be understood from appearance alone. The answer lies within the natural structure of the tree and a carving tradition that transformed it into a powerful figure.
My mother found this in an attic when her parents bought a shore house north of New York City. And it's been in the family ever since.
The appraiser identified it as a PENOBSCOT root club, a carving tradition associated with the PENOBSCOT people of the Wabanaki region in Maine. The object was made from a sapling removed with its root ball, turning the slender trunk into a handle and the tangled roots into a face and creature. Rather than eliminating the tree's natural form, the carver studied each root and developed the composition from shapes already present in the wood. Early clubs could serve martial or ceremonial purposes, but the tradition evolved as indigenous life changed under colonization. By the late 19th century, many Penobscot carvers produced root clubs for travelers, hunters, and visitors to Maine. Although connected with tourism, these works preserved technique, visual language, and a long-standing relationship with the eastern woodlands landscape. On the handle, chip carving was created by knife cuts meeting from opposite directions, removing small pieces of wood and leaving crisp patterns. Trefoil motifs and floral elements further connect the object with the natural environment that supplied both material and inspiration. The face is treated like a portrait, with a solemn expression, confident modeling, and traces of surviving color. Its identity is unknown, but the carving suggests an authoritative presence rather than a humorous figure created solely for tourists. Above it is a creature resembling a lizard, newt, or salamander, formed directly from the root structure. Surviving birch bark supports the identification of the material, construction, and late 19th century date. Condition is remarkable because the surface shows almost no major abrasions or scuffs. Patina, created by handling, oxidation, dust, and time, gives the wood depth that refinishing or aggressive cleaning could destroy. The confident modeling indicates an experienced carver who understood how to control expression and balance the composition from multiple viewpoints.
I think on a retail basis, this club would be very much appreciated. I think perhaps in the range of $2,000. If I was going to insure it, I would appraise it at $2,500. It would be very, very much sought by people who collect this sort of thing.
Wow. My entire life, this has been a big, excuse me, it's been a big part of my life.
He's somewhere. He'd be so pleased to have heard that.
The club's value rests on more than craftsmanship, condition, or an appraisal figure. It also connects an unidentified Penobscot carver, the owner's mother, and memories that continue through the family. More than a century later, the wooden face still preserves the powerful presence placed within it by its maker. At first glance, this appears to be an elegant writing table with a leather surface and carefully selected veneer. Nothing on the exterior immediately reveals that the piece of furniture performs an entirely different task. Only when its concealed mechanism opens does the cabinet maker's ingenuity become fully visible.
I brought my metamorphic library table. It was found in an antique shop in Huntsville, Alabama. My parents just thought that it was cool and it's something that I would like, and so they gave it to me as a graduation present.
Ooh, you must be a special child to end up with this as a graduation gift.
I tried to be good.
When closed, the object functions as an English writing table with a leather inset top and gilt stenciled border, making it both practical and formal. Its veneer is distinguished by arching grain radiating from the center, commonly called crotch mahogany. This figuring forms where a tree trunk divides, compressing and redirecting the grain into flame-like bands. The cabinet maker had to cut and match the veneer symmetrically because a slight misalignment could disrupt the entire pattern. The design reflects the English Regency, when elegant proportions and fine mahogany were often combined with mechanical ingenuity. Without a stamp or maker's mark, the appraiser cannot confirm a particular workshop. However, its form and construction resemble designs associated with Thomas Gillow and the cabinet-making tradition later represented by Gillows. The careful description is therefore a known design within that tradition, not a definite claim that Gillows made it. Its hidden purpose appears when the top opens. Wooden supports lock into place, and the internal structure descends into library steps. Oak was chosen for the interior because of its strength and durability, while mahogany veneer provides beauty on the exterior. That division shows how each material was selected for a specific task. Metamorphic furniture solved a practical problem in private libraries, where bookcases often extended almost to the ceiling. Instead of storing a separate ladder, the same floor space could support writing and provide access to elevated shelves. Collectors enjoy the surprise of transformation, but value still depends on furniture quality after the novelty is removed. Here, the handsome veneer, leather top, gilded border, and solid construction demonstrate that this is more than a mechanical curiosity. After approximately 2 centuries, the hinges, locking arms, and moving components still operate completely, preserving both original function and collector appeal.
If it were to come to auction today and be sold in a New York auction house in the context of a library sale, I could easily see placing an estimate of $3,000 to $5,000 on it.
Awesome.
Your parents, unfortunately, have set the bar pretty high. Now I'm thinking about my own children. What am I going to have to get them? I'm not sure I can top them on.
What makes the object memorable is not simply its valuation, but the moment an elegant writing table unexpectedly becomes a way to reach the highest shelves. More than 2 centuries later, the furniture still fulfills its original idea, conserving space, serving knowledge, and creating delight through an ingenious mechanism. A gift offered to a crying child is usually meant only to ease a brief moment of distress. But when that gift comes directly from its maker, the small story surrounding it can become provenance that no auction could recreate. Decades later, the wooden animal once handed over inside a busy shop opened an entire chapter of American folk art.
And my mom took me to the shop to pick up a carving. I was just 1.5 years and I was just, down on the ground, walking around, and then one of the carvings that he had there, because they were all over the place, it fell onto me and hit my head, and I started to cry. Mr. Pierce came and with this alligator and gave it to me.
Elijah Pierce was born in Mississippi in 1892 and later settled in Columbus, Ohio. Barbering provided an income, while carving gradually became a personal method of storytelling. Without academic training, Pierce learned to work with wood from childhood and used spare moments at the shop to create figures, animals, and narrative scenes. The ordinary barbershop consequently became a studio, gallery, and place where the artist communicated directly with the community. Pierce regarded many works as visual sermons shaped by religious memories from childhood. His subjects also extended to everyday life, African American history, freedom, and political commentary. This combination of personal experience and social meaning makes the carvings easy to underestimate when judged only by their rustic surface. The alligator differs because it was carved fully in the round and can be viewed from every side rather than attached to a panel like many narrative works. Its underside bears the initials EP and the date 1947, connecting it directly with Pierce during a relatively early period. The accompanying relief panels reveal a broader range of ideas, including a formerly enslaved person moving toward freedom, political figures, and a composition representing the human senses. Within the collector market, self-taught art is not measured by academic standards of technical refinement. Value instead comes from a distinctive visual language, the artist's historical position, subject matter, signature, date, and verifiable provenance. Every element supports the others here. The alligator carries identifying marks. The panels represent characteristic themes. And the family preserves a rare story of receiving one work directly from the artist.
A retail price would ask $6,000 to $8,000 for the alligator.
Wow.
Each one of the plaques would be $8,000 to $10,000.
Wow.
And the figure of the woman running to freedom, I would say that's going to be more like $10,000 to $12,000 retail. So the total would be $32,000 to $40,000.
Oh, wow. Right, thank you. Of course, they're priceless to us.
What makes the collection special is not simply its valuation, but the way the carvings connect art with the life of a community. The alligator may be the smallest object, yet its story of being personally given transformed it into a bridge between Elijah Pierce, a child, and family memories preserved for decades. Within a family, a treasured object does not always require documentation or an appraisal to receive special treatment. Sometimes, a habit repeated over many years is enough to show that previous owners believed they were protecting something unusual. For this coffee pot, the first clue was that it always disappeared whenever a stranger entered the house.
I don't really know why, because I can't imagine making hot chocolate in it.
Do you know where it's from?
I mean, it looks Pennsylvania Dutch to me. I don't know where they got it or how long they had it, except that it was my husband's grandfather's mother's family that it came down from.
The family name was not entirely accurate because the form identifies it as a coffee pot rather than a vessel specifically intended for chocolate. It belongs to Pennsylvania Dutch tinware, household objects decorated through a technique commonly known as toll painting. The tradition originated in Europe before flourishing within Pennsylvania's German-speaking communities. Regional workshops produced plates, boxes, cups, and pots, then applied paint to protect the metal while transforming everyday utensils into colorful folk art. Individual makers were rarely recorded, so attribution usually depends on construction, palette, brushwork, and motifs associated with particular regions. This example has a lighthouse form, with a tall body, rounded base, and elegantly curved gooseneck spout. Its most unusual feature is the vivid red ground, since black appears far more frequently on Pennsylvania tinware. A red surface retaining such intensity is therefore particularly appealing to collectors. Condition often determines the value of antique coffee pots, because the metal endured heat, steam, and repeated temperature changes during use. After more than a century, rust, flaking paint, and fading prevent many surviving examples from expressing their original design. This pot has only one significant dent at the lid's finial, while the body remains balanced and the decoration stays remarkably consistent. A layer of varnish was applied in the past, but ultraviolet examination revealed no significant inpainting or restoration. That evidence suggests most of the visible color belongs to the historic surface. The American antiques market may move slowly for average objects, but folk art combining rare color, elegant form, and exceptional condition follows a different standard. By repeatedly hiding the coffee pot, earlier generations unintentionally protected the quality collectors value most, an original surface that remains visually alive.
I think at auction in today's market, we'd be looking at around $7,000 to $9,000 at auction. No. This is one of the finest pieces of tinware from Pennsylvania that we've seen. Yeah, it's phenomenal.
Oh my God. Yeah. Never in a million years would I have thought that.
What makes the coffee pot special is not simply its valuation, but the way family instinct protected it before anyone understood its origin. Previous owners never knew its market value, yet treating it as something that required protection allowed a fragile folk art surface to survive almost intact until it could finally be recognized. Sometimes, an extraordinary collection begins with something as simple as a memorable meal. While traveling through Wyoming, publishing magnate Moses Annenberg stopped in Buffalo and tasted trout he thought was exceptional. Curious about where the fish had come from, he followed the trail to the source, bought part of the ranch, and eventually built a large lodge there.
Western designer named Thomas Molesworth. And this is all his designs. Eventually it came up for a sheriff's auction, and my stepfather bought it. The furniture was from like the 1930s, and my folks bought it probably in the late 50s.
For the interior, Annenberg turned to Thomas Molesworth, then a young designer working in Cody. The result was Ranch A, one of Molesworth's earliest and largest commissions, with hundreds of pieces created specifically for the property. His style was unmistakable. Instead of cutting away twisted trunks, natural burls, and irregular shapes, Molesworth made those imperfections the focus. He paired rugged wood with leather, mica, and familiar Western symbols, including picks and gold pans, creating furniture that seemed to belong naturally in the Wyoming landscape. But the importance of this group goes beyond the Molesworth name. Its provenance connects the pieces directly to Ranch A, at a moment when his distinctive Western vocabulary was still taking shape. Some of the upholstery was replaced over the years, so the furniture is no longer completely original. Even so, the surviving woodwork, original materials, and clear ownership history still give the collection considerable weight among collectors today. And when the appraiser began assigning values, the biggest surprise was not the sofa or the chair. It was one of the smallest objects in the group. The table lamp, with its organic wooden base and mica shade, captures many of the elements that made Molesworth's work so recognizable. It may be much smaller than the surrounding furniture, but in the collector's market, size is only one part of the equation. Design, rarity, originality, and provenance can matter far more. And because this lamp can be tied back to the same important Ranch A commission, its modest scale does little to limit its appeal or the price serious collectors might be willing to pay.
But I would guess the couch to be worth at auction about $40,000 to $50,000. The chair, probably $30,000 to $40,000. The table, probably worth $10,000 to $15,000. The little table, about the same, $10,000 to $15,000 at auction.
I love those numbers. Thank
Sure you do.
It's,
this lamp is probably at auction worth $40,000 to $60,000.
Oh, amazing.
Great piece. It's a great piece.
What began with a remarkable trout dinner ultimately became a remarkable chapter in American Western design. Today, these pieces preserve more than Molesworth's craftsmanship. They preserve the story of Ranch A itself. And sometimes, the smallest object is the one that leaves the biggest impression. Sometimes, an object can stay in a family for decades, while the story everyone believes about it is not quite right. This 5-piece set was bought in Japan before the Second World War and was long assumed to be Japanese. But the details on its surface point somewhere else entirely.
I think when we were talking, you thought they were Japanese, 17th century or something was what...
I think they're Japanese.
This is called a garniture.
In fact, these 5 pieces were never meant to stand alone. Together, they form an altar garniture, a censer for burning incense at the center, flanked by 2 candlesticks and 2 goo-form vases, creating the symmetry of a ritual display. Where the set was purchased makes the mistake understandable. Similar ritual forms appeared in both China and Japan, while the goo shape itself reaches back to ancient Chinese ritual bronzes and was later recreated in porcelain. The decoration provides the stronger clue. Lotus blossoms, enamel scrollwork, the Buddhist lion crowning the censer, and elephant-formed feet all belong to a Buddhist visual language. The palette and technique place the set in Qing period China, around the middle of the 19th century, rather than Japan or the 17th century, as the family had believed. Its completeness matters just as much. A single vase or candlestick can survive alone, but keeping the censer, both candlesticks, and both vases together preserves almost the entire original arrangement and makes the set more meaningful to collectors. The condition is not perfect. There are chips, cracks, and repaired areas, all of which affect value. Yet those losses must be weighed against something harder to replace. After more than a century away from its original setting, all 5 pieces are still together. So the question is no longer simply where the set came from. It is what the market will pay for a damaged ritual porcelain ensemble that still preserves its original structure.
It's worth about $15,000 to $25,000 at auction.
Are you kidding? Oh. Wow. Oh, I'm not supposed to say wow. My parents would be amazed.
What makes this case memorable is not only the final figure, but the way an old family story is rewritten. Something bought in Japan turns out not to be a Japanese antique at all. but a Chinese altar garniture still carrying the form, symbolism, and ritual purpose for which it was made. Sometimes the most valuable object at an estate sale is the one the buyer can barely remember finding. This small bottle once sat among boxes of old belongings and mixed lots. Its owner simply thought it looked unusual enough to keep. That instinct preserved a remarkable piece of American folk art almost entirely by accident.
It's hard to say where I got it. It was at least 30 years ago. I go to estate sales. Sometimes I bought items in boxes or just a whole bunch of stuff on a table. But I saw that was special to some degree, so I kept her.
Look closely, and the real surprise is the miniature world inside the glass. Geometric patterns, brightly colored flowers, and a tiny sailing ship that almost resembles a miniature painting. But none of those colors come from paint. Andrew Clemens gathered naturally colored sandstone near the Mississippi River around McGregor, Iowa, ground it into fine sand, and carefully fed it through the narrow mouth of a bottle. After losing his hearing as a child, Clemens attended the Iowa School for the Deaf. He began with relatively simple patterns, then developed increasingly complex flowers, eagles, trains, steamboats, and landscapes. The most remarkable part is that there is no glue. Clemens used handmade tools to position and compress each layer, relying entirely on pressure between the grains to keep the image in place. A slight error could disturb a geometric pattern, while every change in color had to be precise enough to create recognizable outlines and depth. The sailing scene and elaborate floral decoration show an artist working at a mature technical level. Although this bottle has lost its paper label and has no documented provenance before the estate sale, its precision and distinctive decorative vocabulary are strong enough to identify Clemens's hand. The medium itself makes survival remarkable. Glass can break, seals can loosen, and even a small shift in the sand can permanently distort a composition built with extraordinary patience. So, an object kept simply because it looked special now leads to a very different question. What is it actually worth?
I've talked to my buddies at the folk art table, and we're very comfortable with this being in a retail range of $25,000 to $30,000.
I'm thinking again about that selling. No, I'm not. Maybe. That's a lot of money. That's great.
What makes this bottle memorable is not only the appraisal. Clemens transformed naturally colored Iowa sand into images capable of surviving for more than a century. From an anonymous estate sale find, the bottle ultimately proves its origin through the one thing hardest to imitate: craftsmanship. Sometimes, what makes an antique valuable is not the name of its maker, but the historical names that can be proven to have touched it. In the early 1980s, a collector bought this small wooden box when a collection connected to Mount Vernon was dispersed. The price was only a few $1,000s, but the most important part of its story was hidden inside.
And a descendant of the Custis line liquidated that large estate, much of which went back to Mount Vernon, especially the items that were known to have been at Mount Vernon during the occupancy by George and Martha Washington. And I purchased this directly from the descendant.
This is a French portable writing desk, made in the late 18th century, with compartments for ink, pens, and writing tools. The crucial clue is a silver plaque attached to the desk. Its inscription records a chain of ownership beginning with the Marquis de Lafayette. The recipient, Elizabeth Parke Custis Law, was Martha Washington's eldest granddaughter. According to the inscription, Elizabeth later passed the desk to her daughter, ELIZA Law. But strong provenance cannot rest on family tradition alone. Inside the desk is another piece of evidence. A document dated 1823 stating that Lafayette sent the object to Elizabeth. That date comes just before Lafayette's return to the United States in 1824, making the chronology plausible. The genealogy also fits. The names of the recipient, her heir, and the descent through the Custis family can all be checked against historical records. The desk does not need to have belonged to George Washington to be significant. Its importance comes from a more specific and verifiable association: Lafayette, descendants of Martha Washington, and a surviving trail of evidence linking them to the object. For something purchased modestly in the early 1980s, the question is no longer what an old writing desk is worth. It is what the market will pay for a history that can actually be proven.
In terms of the value of it, I would place a pre-sale estimate of somewhere from $30,000 to $50,000.
Wow.
Well, it's not a bad investment for $1,500, $2,000, whatever.
Indeed not. Indeed not. Wow. I'll be very careful driving home. I'm aghast.
This case shows why provenance can sometimes outweigh the maker, materials, or decoration of an antique. Here, history is not merely passed down as a story. It is engraved in metal, preserved on paper, and carried from one generation to the next. Sometimes an extraordinary discovery is not hidden in an old attic or a famous collection. It is sitting in plain sight on a thrift store shelf. This vase cost just $4.99. The buyer had no idea who Overbeck was. He simply noticed that the shape, surface, and finish seemed unusually well made.
I saw it sitting on the shelf, and I thought, oh, it's so beautiful. And I knew it was good quality, but I knew nothing about it. So I picked it up and looked, it had markings. And I thought, well, I don't know who it is, but for $4.99, I'm going to buy it.
The markings on the bottom led to Overbeck Pottery, the studio established by 4 Overbeck sisters in Cambridge City, Indiana. Their work reflected the American arts and crafts movement, with its emphasis on handcraft, original design, and the individual touch of the maker. This vase dates to around 1920, a period especially admired by collectors. A striped figure repeats around the body, set against a pink sun, and trees reduced to simple geometric forms. Rather than copying nature realistically, the artist simplified each subject into basic shapes and arranged them in a rhythm that follows the form of the vase. The piece was hand-thrown, tooled, and decorated by hand with a matte surface. Its firing was also remarkably even, allowing the colors and shape to remain balanced, something that could be difficult to achieve in studio pottery. Overbeck was not a factory producing thousands of identical objects. For collectors, the OBK mark is only the beginning. The strength of the design, quality of execution, success of the colors, and whether a piece represents the workshop at its best, all matter. This vase brings nearly all of those qualities together. It does not need a famous provenance to make it important. Its value is contained in the object itself, its period, design, and craftsmanship. And that makes the gap between its goodwill price and its specialist market value almost unbelievable.
At auction, it would bring somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000.
Can't believe that.
I mean, it's a seriously good piece of Overbeck.
Oh my goodness.
It's got everything it's got to have. This one's got it.
Got my heart thumping.
What makes the story memorable is not only the appraisal. The buyer knew nothing about the maker or the history of the vase, yet he recognized its quality before he knew its name. Sometimes that instinct is the first clue that leads to an extraordinary discovery. Sometimes the most valuable object in a house is the one a family has lived with for so long that no one thinks to treat it like a treasure. This enormous CELADON charger spent years in an attic, later under a bed, and at one point even became a seat for the family cat. Its owner knew only that an uncle had brought it home from Japan after the war, so she assumed it was simply an old piece of Japanese ceramics.
It is a CELADON bowl that was a gift to me from my uncle, who brought it from Japan. He was a civilian director of the educational troops after the war, so this was one of the things that he sent back.
The first clue is underneath. A 6-character mark points not to Japan, but to China. The old wooden box adds another clue. Its label identifies the object as a large CELADON dish from the Yongzheng period. That places the charger in the early 18th century, during a Qing reign celebrated for refined porcelain and renewed interest in earlier ceramic traditions, including the green glazes associated with Longquan wares. With CELADON, simplicity is part of the challenge. There is little decoration to hide firing flaws. The glaze must remain even across a broad surface. The porcelain must hold its shape in the kiln, and the dragon in relief at the center must remain visible beneath the glaze. At this scale, every risk increases. Large porcelain can warp or crack. An uneven color can disrupt the calm surface collector's prize. The nearly monochrome appearance is therefore evidence of technical control. Together, the period mark, scale, glaze quality, and imperial design language place the charger far beyond ordinary decorative celadon. The Japanese box adds another clue, suggesting that someone understood what they were preserving before the piece reached America. Remarkably, after centuries of survival and decades spent in attics, under beds, and beside a rather large cat, the glaze remains in unusually fine condition.
At auction today, in 2021, I would put perhaps a conservative auction estimate of $80,000 to $120,000.
Oh my, really? And it's under my bed all the time?
I think under the bed is not such a bad place to keep this.
I don't know what to say.
I think you've kept it very well for so long. It's in very good hands.
What makes this discovery memorable is not only the valuation. 6 characters on the base, an old wooden box, and an exceptionally preserved celadon glaze unlock the object's real identity. A piece nearly 3 centuries old had survived all that time, only to spend decades being treated like an ordinary household object and somehow survive that too. Sometimes, the luckiest object in a family is not the one carefully protected, but the one that somehow survives decades of being kept in all the wrong places. This enormous lampshade traveled from a Massachusetts estate to a chicken coop, then through an attic, a porch, and a barn loft. The family thought it looked like Tiffany, but there was no signature to prove it.
So I would love to know how you got this.
My grandfather was a superintendent of the grounds at an estate in Gloucester, Massachusetts at Eastern Point. And this apparently came from the estate.
The first clue is its size. At about 33 inches across, the shade is larger than most domestic lampshades. With hundreds of pieces of glass, that scale adds weight, stress, and risk of damage. But the attribution does not depend on a stamped name. Specialists read the object itself, the glass, the way each piece was selected, the geometric pattern, and the construction. With Tiffany, those details can be more persuasive than a signature, because a mark can be copied while craftsmanship is harder to imitate. The shade dates to around 1900, when leaded glass lighting was still relatively new in the Tiffany workshop. Inside, support fins reinforce the structure while following the geometry of the pattern, changing direction so they do not block important areas of glass. The engineering almost disappears into the design. Some chains and decorative arms are consistent with Tiffany, while the pole and part of the socket assembly are period pieces, but not Tiffany. After more than a century of use, changes like these are not unusual. What matters most is that the shade itself retains the construction details specialists expect. Its condition is surprising. After years in a chicken coop, attic, and barn loft, a shade this large could easily have suffered extensive cracking. Instead, the damage is remarkably limited. When glass quality, early date, engineering, and condition all point in the same direction, the missing signature becomes far less important.
And it's got Tiffany all over it for me. Something like this in a retail setting could be priced anywhere between $100,000 and $150,000.
Good to know.
So the pole coming down and that semicircle piece,
not,
they're not Tiffany.
Okay.
What makes this case memorable is that the shade proves its identity through the way it was made. Glass, geometry, and hidden reinforcement all tell the same story. After surviving an extraordinary journey, it remains intact enough for the craftsmanship to speak more convincingly than any signature could. Sometimes an object can stay in a family for generations and still keep its true identity hidden, simply because no one thinks to ask exactly what it is. This enormous platter had been in the guest's grandfather's home for as long as she could remember. Everyone admired its glittering surfaces and elaborate decoration, but almost no one knew who made it or why it was so complicated.
It was in my grandpa's house for as long as I can remember, and we don't know really that much about it.
When I first saw this, you brought it to the table and you peeled back the packaging, and my heart kind of skipped a beat just a little bit.
In fact, this is a presentation charger made in Vienna around 1880, combining silver, enamel, and rock crystal. The workmanship is attributed to Hermann Bohm, a workshop known for luxury objects in the Renaissance Revival style. The transparent panels may look like glass, but they are actually rock crystal, a natural form of quartz that must be cut, ground, and carved. Tiny internal fractures are one clue that the material is natural rather than manufactured glass. Around each crystal panel is a silver framework covered with colorful enamel and decorated with putty, masks, scrollwork, and small figures. Even the feet were carefully finished. The back reveals another level of construction. Small bolts correspond to ornaments attached separately on the front, showing that the charger was assembled from numerous components rather than made as a single decorative surface. Its scale makes that craftsmanship even more impressive. At nearly 22 inches across, it is unusually large. More crystal, joints, and mounted elements also meant more opportunities for cracks, losses, or structural damage. Remarkably, the charger remains in relatively good condition, despite one memorable piece of family care. At one point, it was washed in the sink. There is no famous provenance adding value here. What makes the piece important is visible in the object itself, its materials, scale, workmanship, and quality.
I think if I were to see this come up at auction, I would feel very comfortable with an auction estimate of $30,000 to $50,000.
Oh my gosh. Wow. We had no idea. That's incredible. We've always loved it. My husband has lugged it around all day today, so I'm glad it was worth the effort.
This case shows how the difference between old decoration and a serious collectible can hide in details most people overlook. A fracture inside the crystal, bolts on the reverse, or enamel continuing to the feet. After more than a century, the family platter is finally understood for what it is, an ambitious luxury object from Viennese Renaissance Revival design. For 25 years, this gramophone had been at the center of a family debate. The husband believed that something bought in Europe had to be an authentic antique, while his wife suspected it might simply be a reproduction. With its enormous horn, wooden cabinet, and hand-cranked mechanism, either argument seemed possible. The machine looked old enough to keep that argument alive.
This is a gramophone. We picked it up maybe 25 years ago in Ljubljana, Slovenia.
Okay. External horn gramophones really do belong to the early history of recorded sound. But their distinctive silhouette became so familiar that versions continued to be produced long afterward. That means specialists cannot date one from the horn alone. The label, hardware, mounting, and construction all need to tell the same story. Here, the green label provides the first clue. It is identified as a later reproduction label, placing the machine around the 1940s rather than the earliest gramophone period. The mounting that supports the horn is also not completely consistent and may be a replacement or a later component. That does not make the entire machine a modern fake. More accurately, it is a later production gramophone designed in the visual language of earlier models. The small dog beside it tells a similar story. The famous His Master's Voice dog is Nipper, traditionally shown tilting his head toward the horn. This figurine holds its head more upright, has an added dark patch around the eye, and shows relatively crude paintwork. Those details point to another reproduction. The case is a useful lesson in authentication. An object can look convincingly old, but specialists still ask whether every component agrees with the same period and construction standard. And reproduction does not mean worthless. External horn gramophones retain decorative appeal, while Nipper adds instant recognition and nostalgia.
I would put an auction estimate in the $800 to $1,200 price range.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. Am I right or is my husband?
That is the question. I think you're both right.
Okay.
The fairest answer is probably that both were partly right. It is not a completely original early antique, but neither is it a worthless decoration. After 25 years of debate, the answer was hidden not in where it was bought, but in the small details of its label, hardware, construction, and companion figurine. Some treasures are hunted down. This lamp was almost left on the curb. It sat outside a house with a free sign, and the woman who found it did not even think it was especially attractive. She walked past once, then returned the next morning and took it home simply because curiosity won.
He could always cut it off if I wanted to, but I should wait and find out about it before I do.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you about your lamp. It is a Louis Comfort Tiffany lamp. It's actually made by Louis C. Tiffany Furnaces, Inc.
A neighbor's warning about the old plug changed everything. The lamp was produced under the name Louis C. Tiffany Furnaces, Incorporated, around the middle of the 1920s. It combines a gilded bronze base, enamel decoration, and a blown glass shade. And the shade is the key. Unlike Tiffany's famous leaded glass lamps, built from many separate pieces, this shade was blown as a single glass body. Damascene decoration creates flowing bands across the surface, while iridescence changes the color as light moves across it. That effect belongs to the tradition of Favril glass, where color, texture, and optical depth are built into the material itself. The caramel coloration is especially desirable to collectors, and the hidden LCT Favril mark beneath the fitting further supports the identification. Condition matters even more. A blown glass shade is one continuous structure. If it cracks or breaks, there is no individual panel that can simply be replaced. The fact that this shade has survived intact for nearly a century is a major part of the lamp's appeal. Ironically, the old electrical cord that first caused concern is not the part collectors need preserved at all costs. The lamp can be professionally rewired. What matters is protecting the original decorative metalwork, and above all, the Favril shade. There is no famous provenance here, and the owner paid nothing for it. Its value has to prove itself through the glass, marks, craftsmanship, and condition.
In a retail venue, something like this could sell for between $10,000 and $15,000.
Oh my God.
You definitely want to get it rewired because there's absolutely no value in original wiring. And if you broke the shade, the base would be worth about $500 to $1,000. So the shade is very important.
The most memorable twist is that the part that first seemed dangerous was also the part that could be replaced. The cord can be changed. But a caramel Favril shade that has survived for nearly a century does not get a second chance. Sometimes, a museum-level treasure can spend decades in a family without anyone realizing it is more than an old blanket. This textile simply rested behind a chair. The family had long repeated a story connecting it to Kit Carson, but no expert had ever examined the piece or verified that history.
I don't know an awful lot about it, except that it was given by Kit Carson, given to the foster father of my grandmother.
And do you know who made this weaving? Do you know what kind of blanket it is?
It's probably a Navajo, but that's about all I know.
What caught the appraiser's attention was not the famous name, but the weaving itself. This is a Diné, or Navajo, wearing blanket made around the middle of the 19th century. It belongs to what collectors call the first phase, among the earliest surviving forms of historic Diné trade blankets. The design is remarkably restrained. Broad horizontal bands without the complex diamonds and geometric compositions seen in later Navajo textiles. But that simplicity leaves little room for error. Any inconsistency in spinning, tension, or proportion becomes visible. The wool was hand-spun and woven so tightly that the surface was described as almost silky. The blue bands use indigo, while the red is associated with bayeta, a commercially produced wool cloth that Diné weavers unraveled and reused as yarn. One damaged area was repaired very early. On many antiques, a repair is simply a condition issue. Here, it also records the blanket's working life, someone considered it important enough to mend. Its rarity comes partly from that original purpose. This was a textile meant to be worn and used, so generations of wear, insects, moisture, repairs, and reuse eliminated many comparable examples. And the Kit Carson story must remain separate. Without firm documentation, that association cannot support the appraisal. Remarkably, the blanket does not need it. Its age, materials, weaving quality, rarity, and condition already place it in an exceptional category.
I'm still a little nervous here, I have to tell you. On a really bad day, this textile would be worth $350,000. On a good day, it's about $500,000.
Oh my God.
And you had no idea.
I had no idea. I just laying on the back of a chair.
Well, sir, you have a national treasure.
Wow.
A national treasure.
I'm amazed. I'm flabbergasted.
The family legend may sound like the most important part, but in the end, it is almost unnecessary. The real value survives in the hand-spun wool, the indigo bands, the old repair, and the restrained visual language of early Dene weaving. For decades, it looked like an old blanket behind a chair. In reality, the textile itself had been carrying the evidence all along. A handmade gift can earn a thank you whose true value is not understood until decades later. In the late 1950s, the guest's aunt met Alexander Calder at a party and showed him a needlepoint pillow she had made from one of his works. Calder liked it enough that, a few days later, an unexpected gift arrived at her home.
You've owned this for a while, since 1985, I believe.
Yeah.
And you had a slight restoration to it in 1986. Some of the colors were touched up a little bit.
Calder had transformed the mobile into one of modern sculpture's most recognizable forms. His breakthrough was allowing air itself to change the sculpture. Shapes turn, distances shift, and the composition never remains fixed. That freedom depends on precise balance. Each element has its own weight and distance from a pivot, so bending a wire or moving a joint can alter the entire work. Calder's skill was making those calculations disappear, leaving an object that seems to float effortlessly. Calder often created intimate works for friends and collectors, and at this small scale, even a tiny change can disturb the equilibrium. The provenance is unusually strong because the mobile passed directly from Calder to the family as a gift. But the art market still requires more than a compelling story. Some paint was touched up during a restoration in 1986, reducing complete originality. At the time of the appraisal, photographs and documentation had been sent to the Calder Foundation, but the mobile had not yet been examined in person. That distinction matters. Provenance explains where an object came from, but specialists still need to study the wire, joints, paint, construction, and movement before confirming attribution. Even with restoration and final validation still pending, the provenance, Calder vocabulary, and stronger market had made an earlier valuation of around $30,000 dramatically outdated.
Right now, Alexander Calder's market is extremely hot, and in a good retail setting, it would not be at all inconceivable that this very small, wonderful piece of art could probably break $1 million.
Oh my God.
Not bad for a pillow.
Oh.
I'm sure your husband, who was watching off camera, will be equally happy with the good news.
Oh, I think so.
That's great.
What makes this story memorable is that it began with two personal gifts, a pillow made out of admiration and a small sculpture sent back as thanks. Decades later, that exchange became provenance almost impossible to recreate. Calder's achievement remains just as striking, turning a few simple pieces of metal, wire, gravity, and moving air into a sculpture that never appears exactly the same way twice.